Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. Welcome to yet another edition of Beyond Now, our Tuesday afternoons regular webinar at Porto Business School. It has been now 2.5 months since we started our weekly webinars during the pandemic, and keeping this after the pandemic, covering topics that we do believe that are absolutely relevant for not only the present, but especially for the period after the pandemics, and trying to do so by inviting top professionals, top executives, top and brilliant minds from around the world to share with us their reflections, their thoughts, and their feelings about some of these topics. This week we're going into analytics, into the analytics world. It's about accelerating analytics to improve targeted marketing and connecting this idea of a more data-driven decision-making process, adjusted and adapted to the marketing atmosphere. But I think we will go perhaps even beyond that. We'll have a more holistic perception, because for what I know, and I know a little bit about our guests, Bernardo Almada-Lobo and Pedro Amorim, it's like the conversation will be like cherries. One will pop up the other. But first and foremost, let me introduce my guests. Pedro Amorim. Pedro Amorim is Pedro and Bernardo are both co-founders of LTPLabs. They are partners. They are partners in this wonderful project and a great company that has been partnering up with Porto Business School for quite some time now. But aside from that, they are also both brilliant entrepreneurs and brilliant academics. Pedro Amorim being professor at Faculdade de Engenharia from the University of Porto, also professor here at Porto Business School, and running a research center at INESC. Bernardo Almada-Lobo, similar path, also a full professor at Faculdade de Engenharia, board member at INESC Tech, and so they have this wonderful, both of you guys have this wonderful journey of being an entrepreneurs and academics, with bringing the best of both worlds, which is not usual. So first and foremost, Bernardo and Pedro, thank you so much for accepting my invitation and for sharing with us your thoughts and feelings, and let's get straight to the topic. So analytics, data science, data-driven decision making, these are topics that have been on the back of everyone's mind, on the top of all C-levels agenda. And this idea of data-driven decision-making, the process of using data to inform your decision-making process, validate a course of action before committing to it by using data, by leveraging data. And this has been really a very important trend on management in this past years, as the data economy starts building its way and becoming, I would say, the most important industry out there. If you analyze the 10 most valuable companies in the world, well, you see that they're not from oil and gas anymore. They're data companies. And how can we leverage data in our day-to-day life, especially by enhancing the quality of the decisions that we make? And especially, how can we use analytics to predict, to foresee, to anticipate what can be trends, what can be consumer behaviors, what can be, pretty much any pattern that you might detect, and be more proactive and be anticipate. And I want to start with this, and I'll start with you, Bernardo. Analytics has been such an important aspect of the prediction side of management, and we have been using analytics and data-driven decision making and machine learning and AI to try to predict pretty much everything we can think of. Yet we were not able to use all the analytics and all the analytics model to predict the impact of COVID-19, right? So what happened?
Rui, first of all, thank you very much for the opportunity to share some thoughts. It's always a pleasure to discuss these topics with you. Indeed, I mean, machine learning and advanced analytic models have been under pressure for the past few months. Especially for businesses that had this type of analytics in production, to gain some intelligence for instance, inventory management optimization, product recommendation based on customer behavior. In a lot of these situations, actually, I mean, machine learning is somehow influenced by the real world. So that what happened was that all of a sudden, these type of models, they were affected by this uncertainty in data, inconsistency behavior, missing data points, even some of the procedures that have to do with detection of anomalies and trying to understand what is an outlier. I mean, currently, can anyone say what is a normal period? What is a baseline? So actually, it's indeed there was this likelihood of being somehow obsolete, the machine learning. On the other hand, what we do see is that given this current volatile environment, there is a strong belief from managers and from executives that data-driven decision making is a must-have in order for their companies and their businesses to survive and hopefully to eventually grow. Actually, I mean. It is somehow mandatory to make better decisions faster, more informed decisions, to have more alternatives, wider solution space. But of course, for that, you need skills, you need capabilities, you need analytical tools. So there was actually in the recent times spending actually increase in this area of analytics. Now, what is important in this data-driven decision making was that we have been observed some limitations already in the past, and actually what happened was that in the recent times, these limitations got even more obvious. This uncertainty in supply and demand that we have currently in the current crisis is enforcing companies to somehow project beyond single scenario plans, single punctual projections. They need what if analysis to come up with solutions for alternative scenarios, given the different data inputs in terms of demand, in terms of supply, in terms of price, cost, technology base. Another issue that it cannot be anymore as in the past, companies really need to be more flexible. All those planning cycles that we observed in the past with frozen periods, they do not anymore deliver. So you need to have a continuous planning activity. The plans, they should avoid being top-down. I mean, you need to have more granularity. You need to have more outcomes in terms of SKU level, channel, customer, day-to-day, so that you actually can somehow pinpoint the inefficiencies that you currently have within the companies. Now, you mentioned data. Of course, looking at to our recent data history, it's not anymore enough to extrapolate past history, and it's not anymore enough to do it solely with internal data. Actually, one of the things that happened with all these type of analytics was that they were trained and they were tested just based on a certain domain of knowledge data, and all of a sudden that was not enough. So you need to bring actually different data streams, different data sources. You need to connect these dots to have a comprehensive view. When I refer to external data, I mean web and social media, also crossing with Nielsen, INE, Euromonitor, all of these different types of data, they really need to be cross-fertilized in order to somehow have a more clear picture of what's going on. And these limitations of decision-making, we have seen impacting vital processes in the companies. And some of those...
Would you allow me 1 second just to interrupt you here? Because I think I think this deserves also to connect back to Rui's point in the beginning. So Rui was saying, analytics is definitely something that we want to look now. We will look into the future, and the Beyond Future webinar wants to really, set the tone of how we want to see these issues overcome in the next years. But I think it's interesting to see that the limitations that you are mentioning here in terms of decision making and how decision making really impaired the way people look and analyzed, and how the algorithms analyze all the trends that were rising, were actually things that were, this was not a pandemic consequence, right? This is something that was there. So the iceberg was there. All these limitations in our organization was there. The only thing is that this, the pandemic somehow, they surfaced, right? They made these issues surface. So it's not really a matter of, it's not because of the pandemic, right? It's a matter of the way we were set up until now. And we see that until now we have probably not a very good decision-making process. And we all see that, in particular in risk management, we all see that we have maybe not looked at the risks in the same way, the way we book travels and without, the possibility to rearrange them, everything. So every time I heard that argument, but the underlying idea, so the bottom line idea that I want to pass is that this has been there for a long time, right? It's just that we didn't really look at the structural problems in our decision making, and I think this is a nice time to look at them right now. Sorry, I just wanted to make.
No, it's important because I do believe that also these limitations, people were aware of those limitations. For instance, if you think about the silos of the organizations, if you think about, for instance, the way production planning was performed separately from logistics planning, or the way operations was being planned separately from the marketing plans. I mean, you really need now to have cross-functional teams to have these somehow wider performance vision of the whole company. And actually, what we have seen is that regardless of the strategic or the type of the nature of the problem, from more strategic to more operational, these limitations somehow really affected current decision-making processes. I mean, let's think about designing the network, the footprint of the stores, of layouts, warehouses, given the current boost of some channels. Or if you think about the assortment, the type of products that you should offer, I mean, just the changes in customer behavior, for sure. Portfolio management is a must now to be reevaluated. Also, from a more operational point of view, if you think about workforce planning, production planning, and scaling, everything was really affected by these limitations. But most important is that all these different type of problems that we have been tackling, the customer is at the center. All of them, I mean, they should be completely customer centric, and actually you need to strike for the perfect balance between value proposition and efficiency. And this is something that is quite clear now. And in all these problems, actually, we are either sizing the resources, planning them, or scheduling them. And the resources, they might be product oriented, channel oriented, machine, equipment, budget oriented. I mean, you name it. But essentially, that you need to have this end-to-end view, holistic view, customer at the core, and you also need advanced analytics to tackle these problems.
Let me jump there, Bernardo, because I think this is super interesting, and I want to slightly go deeper here, because we have been in the past years, and I do agree with Pedro. We were aware. We were doing something. We were trying to analyze. It was out there. We were trying to address the topic. The topic was important, however, perhaps not urgent. And suddenly, what a pandemic really does is, as with everything in digital, it accelerated. It's not transforming, it's accelerating the things that were happening. And then suddenly we realized that perhaps we were not addressing the way we make decisions, the way we use data in favor of better decisions in the comprehensive, holistic way that we should have. And we need to accelerate that adjustment. On the other hand, that acceleration also brings the human value to it. I love the idea of the customer centricity, as you guys know, but we have been until now, we have been has been this kind of Benfica Sporting discussion. On one hand, we want to be customer centric, and then so the user and the customer at the center. We bring the front office to the back, and then we adjust everything we need to adjust. On the other hand, we have those that said, no, we have this great systems of productivity and efficiency that we really want to streamline, and sometimes it was a fight. What are you saying is that we can bring analytics and advanced analytics to help bridge this gap and really have a comprehensive approach that can either be and can simultaneously be customer-centric and ultra efficient, right?
Yeah. Actually, there are two steps here depending on the maturity of the company. You might have companies that are still running at an inefficient frontier. So that means that they can still enhance the service level value proposition without compromising their efficiency levels. And analytics can actually somehow pinpoint and identify those opportunities. And then you have other type of companies, more mature, that are already at this efficiency frontier. And in this situation, it's really a matter of trading off enhanced service level against efficiency. But the way you somehow play around these two criteria can be actually promoted by advanced analytics.
Let me complement that. I think in line with what you're discussing, that the siloed effect, and if we let's make it simple, right? The marketing operations trade-off that we see in companies writing every day, they tend to be faded away, I guess, for with the current setup that we are. And in particular, I think the digital channel is quite the champion in that regard, because suddenly you have operations going literally into the house of people, right? So suddenly you have maybe the largest sales force today in Portugal are, CTT or, someone or DHL or the guys that enter in our doors every day. So suddenly everything that connects traditionally to operations, say lead time, say the packaging quality, say all these descriptors of how you actually get your product delivered to your house, suddenly they influence so much on the customer lifetime value, right? So you actually have these two, let's say, trains of thought connected together in the customer, because they actually operations, they really, they went all the way through to the customer side. So definitely, I guess that we have a shift of perception of how we should tackle these decisions in an integrated fashion compared to what we have done so far. And that goes back to assortment planning, as Bernardo was saying before, or other types of problems. I think actually you can extrapolate this reasoning for, I would say, virtually every problem. In some of them, it might be that it doesn't really, that doesn't add so much. But in the end, I always find that you can always bring a little bit of the customer if you are back there in the operation side, or you can bring a little bit of operations if you are down there in the customer side, right? And in the middle is where you really need to strike a good balance between those.
Yes,
but there is a price to pay. If you want to blur the silos, the problems get more complex, and they get, the solution space gets larger, and so you need more advanced analytics to solve it. And actually, in terms of these advanced analytics, you should really try to understand what are the current processes of the companies and where they are currently in terms of their maturity. Let me bring, for instance, an example from trade promotions. So try to understand how you should manage discounts and the gap that we all know from gross to net price. Some companies are doing a serious work in terms of trying to understand through dashboarding what has happened. So we're talking just about descriptive analytics. Trying to monitor closely the different KPIs in terms of the net price band, in terms of the uplift from a product, client, channel. With an interesting granularity, but they are just looking towards what happened. Then if there are some companies that really try to identify what are the factors, what are the drivers that have an influence in this promotional uplift. So was it the customer, was it the channel, was the brand, was the depth of discount, was the communication means? And in here already you need something else than just pure dashboarding. You need data mining, you need statistical analysis to identify these type of drivers. But both in descriptive analytics and diagnostic analytics, we are still just looking through the mirror. Now,
rear mirror, right?
Rear mirror, yeah, exactly. If you want to actually try to look into the future, try to understand how some variables will behave, you enter this world of predictive analytics, where machine learning is a must. So, for instance, in this example, you might want to predict and to anticipate what will be the impact based on elasticity of each factor on the sales. But we are still not prescribing anything, right? So not optimization is here. This is the next level of analytics where you can actually draw optimal promotional guidelines to optimize return on investment. So we tried to somehow define the frequency of your campaigns, the time between campaigns, the different actions for each type of customer. And then the ultimate stage is that you have internalized all these different type of analytics, and you actually can have a dynamic way of planning this, which will adjust in real time to different conditions. It's rather important to understand the starting point of the company.
If you allow me, I think going to the starting point, I think clearly the slide is wrong in a sense, or is incomplete, because there's definitely the starting point, which unfortunately I think a lot of companies would fall, which is no analytics at all, right?
No analytics at all, yeah.
Not even
zero scenario. Yeah.
Exactly. There's a default scenario there, which I think it's worth to explore because some of them might not even be monitoring what happened in the past, right? So more driving without really looking at that. I don't know if you agree, but I guess that will be some
absolutely
compliment here.
Probably I was a little bit more optimistic.
I guess so.
Guys, before we jump into the marketing aspect, because we decided on the webinar to go a little bit focused on targeted marketing. There's a great question from our audience, and by the way, guys out there, we are not taking the classic presentation then Q&A session. We bring and we embed your questions throughout the conversation with Pedro and Bernardo, and as already Pedro Hugo Rocha, an alumnum from our executive MBA, did. Pedro is stating the following: customer centricity or customer centric is paramount, but with the tectonic shift we are seeing now in customer behavior, isn't there a risk we are applying old models and old data to a new problem? Who wants to take this one?
It's not only the risk; it's for sure 100% sure we have issues on the data, and that's why the machine learning models they might get obsolete. You really need to somehow train more frequent the models. You should, even the way in this type of models we have the data that we use to train, the data that we use to test. All of a sudden, this is an imbalance, and we have no idea whether we have a transitory period or whether things actually change for good. So you really need to deep dive in those models to really update them. But one thing that we should also be, I think, comfortable with is with data imperfection. I mean, of course, you can still get insights from the current data. In a lot of situations, those models that were being run automatically, all of a sudden you had the human going into the joystick to try to understand what happened, to try to adjust, try to correct, to try to bring knowledge from other domains honestly, some months ago, who would thought of using epidemiological forecasts to integrate those forecasts in for instance in sales in sales planning? I mean, all of a sudden it opened some opportunities, but I still do believe that given different weights to data points and crossing with different data sources, you can still, of course, detect preemptively. That's what we want. Customer behavior changes.
Let me add to that. I think the question is a great question, actually, and again, I will go back to the pre-COVID era, and just to say that I think very often, and we all love these buzzwords, right? Big data.
I think we lost Pedro. Yeah. I don't know.
I can try to predict what he was saying, but
use your analytics and bring it. Bring your machine learning of all the years working with Pedro.
It's based on history, and I do not think that Pedro changed that much. But I think it was, I guess clear that what Pedro was trying probably to mention was that also in the past we had already issues with validity of the models, and And the type of techniques were pretty much the same. Now, what we need to do more often is really to jump into those outputs and try to somehow cross-fertilize those outputs with human judgment. It's clear that we need to do that. Another thing that I think companies could try to do, it's a little bit more blue sky, is really try to engage in data partnerships, in trying to get to share data with other companies from different sectors, also from the same sector, because this can actually somehow help a lot, trying to get more insights. Let me, Rui,
I think we need to block. I'm trying to because we are seeing Pedro's screen. I think he's blocked in some sense. I don't know if we can stop him from sharing, and perhaps you sharing. I don't know.
Let me see if I can actually.
I don't think we can. Or perhaps our support Diogo could try to do that. Because we don't know what happened to Pedro.
Let me see if I can actually start sharing my screen, but I cannot.
I think you can't without Pedro updating, and I'm trying to block Pedro also, or to at least cut him from the screen. I don't know if our support Diogo could try and do that. Let me, while we try to fix this, let me bring a topic here that I think can draw a bridge into the marketing aspect that we're covering next. Mm-hmm. And how do you see? And I've had this conversation with Pedro before. I think I didn't have it with you, Bernardo. How do you see the integration or the I think you can share the screen now. I think Pedro disconnected, so you can share the screen, Bernardo. And while you do that, let me bring the question here. How do you connect? How can you think a data-driven decision-making using data and analytics can also collaborate, if you want, with behavioral insights driven decision-making? So the combination you were mentioning, data is imperfect, and this is wonderful because it is a trait that is human, this imperfection, and very often the decisions are made having in consideration also the behavioral aspects of whoever is deciding, but on the case of marketing, the clear understanding that behavioral patterns and behavioral changes are as we are seeing at this moment, for instance, are a challenge for analytics. How do you see this combination between what is purely data analytical, but also something that is more behavioral, and how they can, be together side by side?
We differentiate between what we called big data, so more what you refer in terms of analytical driven, and thick data. So data that is more granular and more related to behavioral data. So actually, even the way in terms of for instance, in terms of marketing, the way companies are now trying to predict customer behavior is not only based on the typical engagement and financial data. So the typical RFM, so the recency, the frequency, the monetary value, but they also really try to bring these behavioral data into the equation. So the feelings, the tastes, the channels that they use. Of course, all of a sudden this brings challenges in terms of the way you populate the matrices, the way you have consistency between data. You don't need actually to put everything in the same engine, but actually you can use some of the behavioral data in different steps to somehow validate the offer and the value proposition that you have. This behavioral data is something that could easily, as you know, Rui, be leveraged by social media, web media, that somehow can raise hypotheses. So this behavioral data can somehow allow you to raise hypotheses so that you can then, with a typical analytical techniques, you can try to somehow prove the hypothesis that you have raised based on these behavioral data, and also to validate.
Yeah. But actually, this follows, and while you are opening the slides, also, this also follows what you were mentioning in the beginning, you and Pedro, about the importance of opening up your data lakes, your data sets, and opening to external data, to unusual data from the social media, from other sources, and then bring that into this idea of turning big data into thin data, which is, I think, a super interesting concept. And then connecting with the marketing thing, for all of us that basically are from the communication and marketing aspects, our dream, our Alice in Wonderland scenario is that we could speak at each single customer as hears, or say, meaning that we could adjust our value proposition, adjust our message to every single individual, and digital and mainly and analytics have been and data have been really helping us on that, and tailoring, focusing, bringing that customer centricity really into new levels. So what are your thoughts, Bernardo, on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're mentioning personalization. So you're mentioning really trying to go into a one-to-one relationship with each customer. This is actually something that even before COVID, we started seeing that, but actually it's one of the issues, and coming back to the question that we got from it's one of the issues that we should probably step back. But I'm going to that in a while.
Yeah, but now let me just warn you that we are seeing your desktop or something, or a folder, not the slides.
All right, sorry. So let me see.
You might need to, you are.
And now, okay, just 1 second. I thought you were seeing.
Yeah, we were seeing the folder.
And now?
Wait a second. But wonderful. You can go. Thank you.
Okay, so coming into this targeted marketing. Sorry, Rui, Pedro just sent me. He said he cannot get inside. I think he has already net. Okay, Pedro is there.
He's there. Yeah.
Okay, so now coming back to this point, I mean, the idea is that every decision has to be client-centered. Actually, this is one of the fundamental chapters of an assessment, a thorough assessment that we're doing in terms of analytics maturity of companies. And this offered targetization is within this pillar of customer and sales, and this assessment that we have been doing. So we actually are trying to somehow assess the different maturity levels of the company. Just to give you an idea, you were mentioning the adaptation of each offer to each client, and I think you were somehow mentioned the latest stage in terms of maturity, Rui.
Yeah.
So to have a precise next best action for each individual.
I was going for the dream.
Yeah, how we wish we had such procedures in our companies. I mean, there is this basic first initial level that people are just doing this targeting based on simple rules. Then they start somehow sketching this client segmentation based on the standard RFM, as I mentioned before. Then you try to somehow understand what is the propensity of each customer for each individual offer. And so this gives you somehow what is the probability that this offer makes sense to a given customer, and based on that you can actually then try to move a step forward and try to optimize, given the current status of the life cycle of our customer, what is the next best offer that we should get. Actually, this is somehow the typical customer-centric campaign optimization. Of course, the starting point is to truly get to know the customer. What are the key drivers of customer experience? What does the customer want? Can we then try to somehow predict the behavior of the customer? What will be the role of this offer to this customer? And then we should really try to understand the journey of the customer inside our organization. It's not anymore enough to understand which segment does he or she belong to, but where is he coming from? In order to understand, when you look to a certain offer, whether you want this offer to reward him, to retain him, to try to sell up within the same category, to try to cross-sell between categories. And then this NBA that you were mentioning before, we should try to avoid saturating the contact with the customer. So you should really try to define what is the most appropriate timing, channel, pitch for the customers. And actually what we are now going to see is that in the current times, something changed in all these different stages. And this is what we'll see now.
I will go even backwards once, Bernardo. Are you listening to me all right?
Yeah.
Which is, so I think what you are showing here, and if we go back to our maturity levels, is kind of the ultimate stage, right? Where the company has full control over the different steps until it really is able to nail that silver bullet that you were describing, right? And target the customer at the right time with the right pitch and make the right offer so that the customer goes and engage in whatever offer we were trying to pursue. But the truth is, even these leading companies that have, full mastery of this cycle have been disrupted by the current events, right? And I guess going back to Pedro Rocha's question where I left you guys for a while, I think you really need to understand that the old data will probably be, a starting point, but not really what you want to use at full speed in this targeting cycle. And you want to make sure that you iterate fast because you are acquiring data in such a fast-paced environment that every new data source, data point that you are able to bring into this your decision-making model will be of a high incremental value. Right, so you want to really make sure that your fast decision-making cycle is in there, and for that, of course, it's not just about analytics, as we know. It's about agile organization. It's about being able to understand that you will fail, but you want to test to be able to learn fast. Right, so all these A/B testing methodologies that we have been listening about. So making sure that you learn with what you have right now, and you separate customers and you try one thing with one customer, you learn from that and you apply to the other, or you apply to every customer. These type of techniques will be very important. And so being able to do that in a fast-paced environment will be quite important. However, this is just a starting point, right? So this is an overall perspective with a fast decision-making cycle. The truth is that in each one of these cycles, and again, we are talking about leading companies, right? We are talking about companies that already mastered this cycle. You still will have a lot of things to do. And the first thing I think it will be important to mention, and again, I think it connects back to Pedro Rocha's question, was which data will you use? Maybe you won't be able to use as granular data as you should. Maybe before you were doing a one-to-one, you will be almost able to give the best offer to that customer because, he's been with you over the last 20 years or 20 months or whatever the horizon is, but you have so much data about that. Imagine that you are in a telco, right? A telco company, and you know this guy for a long time. You have contractual boundaries that tie the customer together. You have all the data points that you can imagine. But these data points might not be as reliable anymore. So if before you were doing a one-to-one targeting, maybe we need to scale it back. And I think this is counterintuitive. When I was discussing this with Bernardo, we could not really completely agree on that. But I think this counterintuitiveness is interesting to explore in the sense that maybe you want to scale back and you need to look at the segment again. One-to-one is maybe too much for the data that you have right now. So maybe we really need to cluster customers and bring the regional aspects to this first step also as a means to acquire the segments that are interesting for starting segmentation, for segmenting your base. Sorry. The second aspect we have already mentioned. It's the importance of external information, right? So if it's in general, it's already important to have external information. I would say that it's much more important right now. Being it epidemiological models, as Bernardo described before, being it understand how Twitter is responding to different keywords, being it masks, being it, China virus. There's a lot of keywords that could be interesting for us to take better decisions in how we really perceive our customer base. I'm saying Twitter because it's a really nice database for analytics in general because of their openness. It's true that in Portugal, maybe Twitter wouldn't be our first option to go through. But you can think about Google Trends, for example. Google Trends is a great source of inspiration for this type of disruptive events. maybe just an anecdote, but there was a project in which we were participating some time ago, and it was about launching a new product, a very disruptive product to the market. And it was so interesting to see that there was a one-to-one correlation between what happened in terms of adoption in reality and what happened 2 months before in terms of Google searches. So being able to nail down which are the queries that you want to track and feed into your forecasting models, which was the case in this example that I gave you, is of tremendous relevance right now. If we move forward, so it's not really about just knowing your customer base. So this was just an example of the type of queries that you can bring on Twitter, and definitely you see a lot of up and downs. I think this is something relevant, right? Because again, it reiterates the importance of having a fast decision making. But as we see the average polarity, for example, which means if the sentiment is positive or negative in terms of masks, for example, it's just shifted a lot over the last weeks, right? So this means that probably we need to keep track of these on probably a daily basis or a weekly basis. Maybe daily would be too nervous, right? We don't want also to get too nervous, but maybe like a weekly basis would be a good way to have an idea of how this will trend. And I think this life during COVID sentiment is also an interesting one, as we see that actually people got a positive feedback, or a positive derivative at least, right? Things were looking nice here. I don't know if we fast forward maybe 3 months down the road, maybe we'll see this going down again, right? But so far, that's what we have been able to witness. So I think this is something definitely to keep in mind when you are segmenting your base in this COVID era. But it's not just about segmenting customers, right? So when we go one step next and we look at the predict behavior, that's where we fall in what we were describing before. So I'm jumping into the second step, and I'm talking about A/B testing. And I cannot get tired of emphasizing how important it is. Again, I think this was important, very important before the COVID crisis. And I think Portuguese companies in particular, they tend not to be very agile in deploying this type of tests and in testing and learning. I think this is changing, by the way. I think when we discuss with executives, we see that this is something that is definitely changing. But when we look, for example, at Amazon, which is usually a great case in terms of A/B testing, where they understand that to be a data-driven company, you need to be willing to learn more and not really be so stiff in your models, right? So you want to gather inputs as time goes by, and maybe I'm offering you, Rui, this pen at 10 cents and the 20 cents pen to Bernardo, just for the sake of gathering data. I know I will be wrong, I'm not sure how likely you are actually to buy this, but I need to gather these values to iterate over my models. And so this is of paramount importance right now.
Going back to your point before that we have been discussing, whether it makes or not sense to go into a one-to-one analysis of each customer. And going back to this A/B testing, what is the A, right? So we usually the typical A/B testing. So we have
great question.
Again, I have a kind of control group that you somehow it would be the normal sample, and then we'd have the B part that would be testing, right? You mentioned before that we could not go into this one-to-one level because of the inconsistency of data and representative behavior in data. And how can we conclude from this A/B testing? This is also...
I'm not sure I'll have an answer for that, but definitely we'll have to assume more in these times, and we'll have to assume that maybe customers are more homogeneous than they actually are. And so maybe you cannot get that deep into understanding all the confounding factors that we would be able to grasp in a normal scenario, right? And make sure that we design a perfect experiment to be sure that we have isolated all the confounding variables to draw the right conclusions. I think we'll have to have a more quick and dirty approach. But I truly believe that, we all know that all models are wrong, but I still believe it's better to do them than don't, right? So at least, even if the levels of confidence won't be as tight as we are, as we love to, right? And in particular, I guess for us at LTP and in our scientific career, it's tough to let away in that regard. This is not as tight, but I think is better than nothing, and that's definitely, I guess, the way we should go. So probably we'll have to assume more and just imagine that customers are more homogeneous than actually they are. Okay, so the control into it would be easier to discern in that regard. But yeah, excellent question. And one thing that I believe will be more or less general, and that's why we have here emphasized in predicting the behavior of customer. Yeah, exactly. That's about price elasticity, right? So we all know, and we have seen on the daily reports, when you look at the economic outlook, we all understand that price elasticity will be a thing. We'll have definitely a lot of households that will decrease their spending in the upcoming times. I was going to say years, but I refrain from saying that because that might be too negative. But definitely this will last for a while, right? So really understanding how this price elasticity will play a role. Will it play a role in your category? To what extent? How can you cope with that without eroding completely your margins, right? How can you really nail that down? I think this will be a tremendous importance. So once again, every data point that we gather in that regard, and I would say that A/B testing could be, again, a good way of gathering data to grasp, to have a feeling of how A/B test, or how price elasticity plays a role, would be, I think, mandatory to do. Mandatory. And again, the digital world allows us to play a little bit more with that, right? It's hard to play with prices on the physical world. In particular, retail, there are laws even, right? You cannot change prices while the store is open, if I guess it correctly. So there's a lot of things that you cannot do. In the digital world, things are a little bit more, flexible. Yeah. Right, so there's actually a wave to leverage there, and to make sure that we have the right teams to be able to deploy these tests and this learning. I think will be super important.
And it's quite interesting that I teach corporate entrepreneurship in our MBAs, and we've been advocating for this culture of experimentation. Mm-hmm. Bring the experimentation, put it out there, and analytics can really help us on that. I think I love the idea of the A/B testing, being able to understand and help, for instance, figure out price elasticity or any other variable. And by the way, there are multiple variables, right? This is a moment of uncertainty where perhaps Patricia Teixeira-Lopes, our associate dean, wrote something that was quite interesting. We all thought this was VUCA, but then it was about a virus, actually, and it really went even beyond VUCA. It went into completely unforeseen aspect. How can we really use this advanced analytics to help us deal? I wouldn't say reduce the uncertainty, but deal with this uncertainty, be more on the accurate side of the decision making, and on the tailoring and trimming of the value proposition within this context of total uncertainty.
I super follow on your comment, and so far I guess sometimes people get the idea that analytics somehow connects to some stiffness in your decision making, and you are there, you have 20 guys with large glasses looking into numbers, and you don't want to go out there and test. I think this is really an outdated image of what we want to see in analytics, right? And even last year when we saw the Nobel Prize going for these tests on human development and humanitarian development, and how actually you should leverage experiments and then treat them very rigorous. And you are very rigorous in setting up the controls and in analyzing the statistical learning that you get from these experiments. But the experiment, there was a famous statistician, I think it was from the 70s, that already said that, the only way that you can infer about causality is if you experiment. In a complex system, if you don't experiment, you change something, you cannot infer about causality. So let's experiment, but let's then really use the statistics to learn about the causality, right? And not just make random assumptions, one, without testing, and two, even with testing, right? So let's just be rigorous on the application of statistics and advanced analytics.
Let me just add something on this, because it's not only a matter of dealing with uncertainty, is a matter of trying to quantify the uncertainty, and analytics can give you that. It can somehow, independently of how large uncertainty might be, if you know the measure that you're dealing with, you can then try to come up with mitigation strategies and in terms of risk management. So analytics can actually somehow try to measure uncertainty.
Yeah, absolutely. I do agree with you. What we have been saying out there in managing Porto Business School, and I would say pretty much every C-level managing a company, it's that the problem is it's not uncertainty, it's how uncertain uncertainty is. How long will it be? How big it is, and how does it impact in our customers? And that's really something where analytics can really, I do agree, can help us in that. We have 10 minutes. I want to fast forward into something, because one of the important things that we have been talking about, and even ourselves, we privately discussed about this, me, you, Pedro, and Bernardo. It's the connection between marketing and operations. And I know you guys have been really deep diving on this. Can you elaborate, please? Because it's the cross-functional team again. Okay, right? Marketeers and operations working together.
Yeah, sure. And I guess this is actually the next step, the fundamental step of defining the offer, right? And assuring the next best offer. It has to be reconnected to two things that we have discussed so far. The first one was exactly what you have just described, right? The importance of understanding that an offer has a marketing side, but it has definitely an operation side. And in a time where we really need to maybe be more innovative in the products that we are bringing to the market, and making sure that, again, that we test new products and that we are able to spike our customers again, you want to make sure that you still keep track of what's going on in your operations, particularly because maybe in your factories you have social distances that you have to enforce, right? So you might have a capacity that is lowered in general. So the interconnectedness between these two functions will definitely need to be perfected in this area. But this is super challenging, right? Because in general, this is already hard, and with such time pressure, it should be even harder. But I see successful companies, and I was discussing with Henkel executives this week on this topic, and it's really interesting how they are really looking at which detergents to offer into different markets, and at the same time, and understanding the customer and how they switch between different brands, and at the same time connecting and understanding in their factory what is the most efficient products to be run, and am I really leveling my capacity the right way. So being able to connect the next best offer that you are pursuing together with the operations, I would say it's mandatory in the current times.
Let me give another example, because even in fast-moving consumer goods that used to be and still are brand-oriented with very strong marketing and sales focus, this type of companies, they were quite fruitful in enlarging their assortment, that product range, and to kill an SKU. It was really difficult, and you know that as the assortment enlarges, you kill efficiency from the operational point of view. Actually, now this type of decisions are being jointly taken with marketing, with sales, looking to all the KPIs of the supply chain, starting from more customer-oriented KPIs, also in terms of OEE, overall efficiency of the companies and plants. So everything has to be now run together to guarantee not only top line, but also bottom line profitability.
Yeah, which I guess will be quite important in the upcoming months, right? As we see, as we connect to what we discussed before on price elasticity. And go ahead, Rui. Sorry.
Yeah, and no, I just want to build on that and understanding that you will see, and you have a slide, I know, about using data from a report that we all love, at least the three of us love, the report why. Another trend you will see is the migration between the customer segments.
Which is, it connects to the uncertainty
absolutely,
side. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
How do you see the NBO process to adjust to this process?
No, I see it's a very hard task, right? Because it connects a lot to what we were saying about the uncertainty of how customers will evolve in the upcoming time. So here we see how they are right now on these different segments, right? And how UI here predicts them to be evolving. And what I get from here is not really the fine lines, but it's quite a mess. Right, and this quite a mess. It scares, right? It scares because you will not be able to foresee quite accurately right now if a customer that is now calm and carrying on, if we will if we'll go into getting normal, or if you will, be more extravagant in his purchases. So how do you really tackle this uncertainty? again, I think it goes back to our first idea. We cannot predict, so let's just iterate it fast. And well, we cannot predict in the long run, let's put it that way, right? So let's try to draw the plans, make sure, of course, the plans, they have value on their own, but make sure that we are able to iterate fast to understand what is right now the best next offer that I should do, right? Or in a given time horizon. So learning will be, I guess, a fundamental skill to acquire in the upcoming times. Yeah. And so this was about next. So sorry, Rui.
Yeah. Go ahead, Pedro. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying that this was the two things that we believe should change on the next best offer. There are other two things, and I think these are more consensual, right? What needs to be changed on the next best action, and now that we get into the action, right, and where we get into persuading our customers of the offers that we have understood were the right for them, and definitely the mastery of the digital experience will be. I won't talk more about this. We are all fed up with understanding how important the online channel will be. And I would just bring the regional aspect as also something that I would factor in, right? So the regionalities will be something that we need to address here. But instead of talking about the digital aspect, I think this graph really shows something also very interesting, which is not just digital, just not online, but an omni-channel evolution that I will believe will be important to master. So customers will not suddenly not going to stores, and so in particular on the retail setting. Here you see the evolution of the buy online, pick up in store. So this the most, I would say, natural omni-channel mode that we can think of. And we see the evolution in 2009, which I would say is not an evolution, right? It just stays basically at the same level. And we see what is happening now in 2020 with this delivery mode, with this buy online, pick up in store. And we see how important suddenly this omni-channel world can be, right? And the opportunities of cross-selling, for example, at the stores that may arise under a lot of constraints, right? With all the plexiglass everywhere and all these things. So we really need how we should, also from a technological point of view, how we will evolve this scenario to make sure that we leverage this omni-channel opportunity that we have been talking a lot for a while. I think we talked, it was less material than it is right now, and it will continue to be. I'm positive about that one.
Absolutely. Yeah. We are 2.5 minutes away, and my last question is, of course, about what also interests, what also at Porto Business School we are deeply interested. So what are the skills? This is something that we have been addressing in our portfolio. We have a postgraduate in business intelligence and analytics. We have an open executive education on analytics for better marketing decisions. We've been bringing that into our portfolio. What are the skills that you really feel that decision makers across all aisles of the company in a cross-functional way, what are the skills, the competences, the knowledges that you really believe that executives out there, professionals out there really should acquire or develop now, but especially beyond now?
Mm-hmm. Maybe I can start. Maybe I can start. I just recall that myself and Bernardo, we have this certified analytics professional. That's something that we have worked in the past. And this was connected to a conference that we usually go. It's called Business Analytics Conference. It's probably the largest business analytics conference in the world. And this year it was an online conference. And one of the speakers was talking about, exactly what you were asking. And she said something which I believe was quite interesting. The skills that you need is something that maybe we thought was not necessary before. You will need the CEO to know how to run a data mining model. You will need everyone in the organization to understand and prototype this type of models. Otherwise, you will never be able really to make these people talk. It doesn't mean that you will be proficient to make it something on a productive stage. But I believe that at least knowing the basics and being able to talk and have the C-level engage and understanding what really a gradient boost machine is, or all these big names that in the end, they are not so hard to grasp, will be of paramount importance to really accelerate analytics as we discuss here.
But on top of it, another thing is that beyond this need of the C-level to be aware and to understand how it works, you really need also in the lower level, the data scientists to understand also about the business. So they cannot really just hide behind the technology. They really need to understand the business levers and how they can actually influence them, because otherwise they will be somehow isolated.
Great, Bernardo, Pedro. I wish you could have another hour. So much to talk about, and so many interesting things. Bernardo and Pedro are collaborating regularly with Porto Business School, and we will have some news for you guys out there on the topic of data-driven decision making, of analytics applied to multiple areas: operations, marketing, management, finance. So this is something that is definitely not nice to have for Porto Business School. This is a must have, and we believe that it should be on the skill set and the tool set of every modern professional manager, executive out there. And so this is part of our offer in our portfolio. And we will have more opportunities to talk about this for sure. We have some cool projects together with LTPLabs, namely our Eurekathon that we will bring back this year. And guys, it's always a pleasure to chat with you guys. I really always feel very, not only inspired, but I feel very ignorant because you are so proficient in all these things and all this knowledge. So thank you so much. Thank you for your time, your patience, and for your kindness and sharing. I would invite everybody in the audience to check the amazing work that they're doing everybody is doing at LTPLabs at ltplabs.com. And thank you for being out there. Most likely this is the last edition of our Beyond Now weekly webinar. Well, we are, as you know, moving into the presential work and classes at Porto Business School. We are back at the campus. The staff, students, and professors will be back at the campus starting already next week or late next week, and then on the 15th. And it's not a back to normal; it's a back to something new. And I've been writing about this. It's reconstruction time again. So we will keep on seeing each other. We will keep on having events that we will organize online, but hopefully also we will see each other back at the campus. So thank you to everybody that throughout this 2.5 months stay with us, and stay tuned in our YouTube channel and all the social media for Porto Business School. And once again, Bernardo, Pedro, thank you so much. Let's stay in touch.
Thank you, Rui.
Welcome, Rui. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.